How you doing, everybody? Welcome back to Before I Forget. I think this is episode number 4. I've been getting a good response. I've started this video channel to document my stories, my memories of my life and music as a fan and as someone that worked in the business. So thank you all so much for tuning in and caring. My main Instagram is 1985 Road Dog. That's where I have all my photographs from my time in music that inspired this video channel. I also have this video channel, which is Before I Forget on Instagram as well, before EYE Forget. And then I have my YouTube channel, Before I Forget, as well. So I asked people what they wanted to hear. It's been a lot of responses, and it's been great to see. A lot of people wanted to hear about Motley, of course, Motley Crue, and a lot wanted to hear about the LA Guns N' Roses jam with the Iron Maiden show back in '88. So I'm going to do the Iron Maiden show because a lot of people wanted to hear about that, when Guns N' Roses and LA Guns jammed at that show, which was actually June 8th and 9th, 1988. But I'm going to do the Motley story to finish some of my Motley stuff that I left off on last episode. I'm going to do that also probably the next day or so. So that's coming. So Motley people, hang in there. And thanks for caring, like I said. So if you haven't been following my videos, in 1988, I was working as LA Guns road manager on tour. We went on tour in January of 1988, played clubs, ended up opening for Ted Nugent, opened up a leg of an AC/DC tour in 1988, a Blow Up Your Video tour. Did a opening slot with AC/DC, more clubs, and, you know, when you're on the road, you're always going from, well, at least in those days, you went from arena opening slots to more club shows. And the club shows is where you really made your money. I mean, you know, everybody wants to open for AC/DC, so they're not, you know, then they don't need to pay you well. So it was just a means to connect with a larger audience. And to hopefully sell more merchandise and move more records and CDs and stuff. That was the main objective for arena tours. Plus, I mean, you're opening for AC/DC, so it's great to have on the resume. So we come off the AC/DC tour, and we're back in clubs, you know, making good money, and it's just nonstop. I mean, we've been on the roads January, February, March, April, May, June. So it's June. With 6 months, we've been on the road nonstop. Lots of insanity. So we are playing a club in Florida, some club in Florida. I can't remember exactly where in Florida. We get the call, we need to jump on the Iron Maiden tour right away. Guns N' Roses were opening the tour, and they are dropping off the tour, and the promoter has, there's 2 nights booked at Irvine Meadows Amphitheater outside of Los Angeles. I don't know how far it is, an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, I don't know. It's outside of Los Angeles, Irvine Meadows Amphitheater. Iron Maiden had 2 nights there with Guns N' Roses as the opening act. And Guns N' Roses had been on this Iron Maiden tour for a while. Seventh Son of a Seventh Son, that was the name of the tour. So Guns N' Roses had been on the tour. They didn't want to go on tour with Iron Maiden. Different kind of an audience, really. It was really a different kind of an audience for LA Guns as well, which I found out. So we get the call, look, you got to get out here. Guns N' Roses are not playing on these 2 shows, and the promoter's losing his mind because at that time, you know, more than half the audience probably bought the ticket to see Guns N' Roses. Guns N' Roses were really, this is June of '88, so Guns N' Roses were really, you know, hitting the rocket to stardom. They were really starting to blow up, Guns N' Roses. And Iron Maiden was, you know, they have their core fans. Iron Maiden always had a strong fan base. They're maintaining. And Guns N' Roses is the opening act. So, you know, Guns N' Roses didn't want to open for Iron Maiden in the beginning at all. But the Iron Maiden stage set was this, everything on the album cover looked like a glacier and like a frozen tundra with like the Eddie Monster, if I can remember correctly, was like white. He was like a Yeti, you know. So as Guns N' Roses was opening every night, there was no way Iron Maiden could cover all that imagery, the glacier. They had this giant glacier behind the stage. It was like very Spinal Tap-ish. So Guns N' Roses are performing every night with this giant glacier behind them and all this Iron Maiden imagery, and they were like, we don't want to be opening in front of a glacier, plus they just didn't dig the band and the audience really. So I think the excuse that was used was Axl was losing his voice, and he might have been losing his voice, I don't know, but they just didn't want to be on that tour, period. So we get the call, we're in Florida. Look, you got to get out here right away. So we're in Florida. It's a long way from Irvine Meadows Amphitheater in California. So we have to book flights, get on a plane, the band and crew, get on an airplane, taking just the basics, guitars, maybe some effects pedals, the sound man, our sound man had his effects rack. I think he might have taken, whatever. We took the basic stuff. So we didn't take drums, amps, nothing like that. That had to be driven from Florida to California in our truck by our truck driver. I mean, that took him days to get back there. So we had to fly, land in California. We had arranged to rent some gear from SIR Studios, which is the big, Studio Instrument Rentals is the big place in, New York, LA, whatever, where you would rent gear. So, you're assuming it's going to be in good condition. So we fly in, we get in, and then the next day is the show. So, I mean, I don't think I slept for like 3 days. You just land, and then you're taking care of equipment and getting all the crap together for a new tour you're jumping on out of nowhere where you're just in Florida. And so the next day was the show, the 8th. So the promoter is getting a lot of crap about Guns N' Roses isn't playing. People want to return their tickets. People are mad. There's no Guns N' Roses. So that's why he got, they put their heads together and got LA Guns, second best thing. And to appease everyone, Iron Maiden had no problem with LA Guns as an opening band. They thought it was okay. So the promoter has this great idea, and he gets on the, I think somebody went on the radio, at the time, you got to remember, radio was everything. So somebody, I don't know what station it was, KNAC, whatever. Somebody got on there and says, oh, Guns N' Roses minus Axl is going to jam with LA Guns, at the end of the LA Guns set as a way to appease everybody. Bad move. Bad move for many reasons. I don't even know if we were consulted about it. I think we were kind of, told about it at the last minute and kind of like, you guys got to do this kind of thing. So, and anybody that really knows the history of Guns N' Roses and Tracy Guns and all that stuff, I mean, it goes way back, Fairfax High School and Hollywood, Tracy and Slash went to the same high school, guitar heroes, egos. So there's a lot of ego involved with all this. And listen, LA Guns, I love those guys. You when you're on the road like that, and it was their first tour. Think about how many tours and how many different versions of LA Guns have been over the years. This was their first tour on a major label, Polygram Records. So I love those guys. We went through craziness together. I saved their ass, they saved mine. It was crazy time. So I always love those guys. It's like being in war, in battle. You're bonded. But at the time, Tracy was a little, difficult to deal with at times with there was so much tension with guitar heroes, whether it was Slash or Vinnie Vincent or, whoever. So there was a lot of tension from the get-go. Anyway, we get to the show. We the crew we get there and the crew is telling us, hey, this gear is not good. Like the amps are not good. There's problems. Things are cutting out, fuse was blown, whatever. I don't know. There's all kinds of technical problems with the amplifiers. I guess SIR didn't have any gear. We were last minute to get this gear. So they might have had their A gear out on the road with somebody else. We were like flew in and go, we need gear. So they gave us whatever they had and it wasn't great. So yeah, so at the end of LA Gun set, Slash comes out, Izzy comes out, Duff comes out. I don't know if Adler came out. He might have. Adler might have came out with like a tambourine. I don't know. Adler, I'm not sure about him. But it was definitely Slash and Izzy and Duff to jam with LA Guns. While this jam is going on, the equipment's going out, buzzing, so of course, everyone's, we were all sweating. If you're on the crew or you worked with the band, you're like, oh gosh, more crap, So anyway, they did a few songs. There's a bootleg out there of those songs they jammed on, And then that was it. That was the first night. That was June 8th, 88. So then at the end, everybody in LA Guns is pissed off. The Guns N' Roses was like, Slash was there with his manager, or road manager at the time, Dougie Goldstein. So I had to go into a, powwow with Dougie Goldstein and Slash. And Adler was definitely in the room with that powwow. You guys sabotaged us. Tracy sucks. You guys just, scared. And, it was all this bad blood also going back to Fairfax High School with Tracy, a lot of it. And Guns N' Roses were a lot bigger than LA Guns at that point. I mean, LA Guns was still on the first tour, but Guns N' Roses was starting to, their album had come out before LA Guns record. So it was gaining steam. So, it was just a lot of that going on. So I read Slash's book where he talks about sabotage. It was sabotage. There was no sabotage, because if you would have seen LA Guns set before the Guns N' Roses guys came out to jam, if you would have seen LA Guns, they didn't sound good either, because it was the same equipment. It was not in good shape. So, there was all this, and look, I've always gotten along with Axl. Axl wasn't around then at this show, because, the reason given was Guns N' Roses are pulling out of the tour because Axl's voice is gone. So Axl wasn't around then at this point, and I hadn't seen him in a long time. But I mean, I first met Axl in '87 when I was working for Relativity Records and going out to LA all the time, and that's where I first reconnected with Kelly Nichols and Mick, and I met Cripps and his brother Robert and all that. But Axl I would see out, and we always talked, and I talked to Axl after that in like '89. I spoke to Axl one time for a long time in New York at a nightclub, and I've always gotten along with Axl. I knew him more than the rest of them. I mean, Slash I never really hung with. Izzy I met a couple times. Adler I met later on, but there's a lot of animosity with LA Guns and Guns N' Roses. I mean, it just was. I mean, the first show I ever worked for LA Guns and Guns N' Roses was, for LA Guns. First show I worked for LA Guns was end of December, '87. It was Guns N' Roses was playing Perkins Palace in Pasadena, California for 3 nights. And each night was a different opening act. I think TSOL was on the bill one night. And LA Guns ended up as the opening act for Guns N' Roses. That's the first show I worked with those guys. And there was so much drama backstage. It was just like a lot of tension, you just feel it. And it was just always around. Anything to do with, and again, that whole first LA Guns tour, anybody that was doing an interview with Tracy always wanted to ask him about Guns N' Roses. So it started eating at Tracy too. It's like LA Guns always kind of lived in the shadow of Guns N' Roses. The Guns and Guns N' Roses comes from LA Guns, So there's a lot of, it's like incestual, it's craziness. So that was that show. The jam was horrendous. It sounded like crap. It was just a mess. I mean, like I said, there's a bootleg out there of that. So we went out on tour with Iron Maiden. Played, I don't know, 8, 10 shows with Iron Maiden in like places like Phoenix, and the Iron Maiden audience is all guys. Or it was all dudes, and it was a rough audience, especially in the Southwest. And it was, not the first night we played with Iron Maiden. This is a great story. I'll throw this in before I end this episode. So Iron Maiden at the time would bring all their gear over from Europe. They'd ship all their PA and everything from Europe. Think about that. Now you just land in the country and you rent stuff, you know. There's top-notch rental houses. Back then, maybe not so much, but Iron Maiden would bring all their gear over from Europe, and it was all on a European voltage. Everything was set to like a European voltage and stuff. So the first night we played with Iron Maiden at soundcheck, our sound man plugged in the LA Guns rack into the Iron Maiden board without switching over the voltage, and our entire rack blew up. And we had no effects for the first couple of Iron Maiden shows. It was brutal. It was nothing, you know. So that went on. It was in 8 days. It was a lot happened. Iron Maiden, one of their truck drivers crashed, and you know, and just we pull up to the gig, and there's like a destroyed 18-wheeler and amps and drums and broken stuff all over the place. And they actually borrowed some of our stuff, I think, from some of our backline for that show. So, you know, that was a quick tour of the Iron Maiden thing, but that's the story there. You know, like I said, LA Guns, there's a zillion LA Gun stories, so I'll tell some more of those. But I got this, I have to finish this Motley story. And once again, thanks for tuning in. I do these videos when I can. I'm not looking to be a guy with a backdrop behind me. I've said that before. I just come and sit down. I don't edit. I speak, mistakes, stumbles, and all. Tune in. Let me know what you want to see, and look for some more Motley Crue stuff coming up real soon. Thanks, guys. Bye.